Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
The average man obsesses over tactics because he fears confronting the architecture of his own mind. He wants the map but refuses to examine the terrain beneath his feet. But the truth is brutal and elegant. You cannot build wealth with a mind designed for survival. You cannot attract millions with a self-concept tied to scarcity. Money follows direction, and direction is impossible without clarity. Not the kind of clarity that comes from vision boards or mantras, but the kind earned through the excavation of your defaults. The way you handle silence, the way you interpret setbacks, the way you speak to yourself in the absence of validation. These are not random traits. They are the levers that shape your capacity to hold power without crumbling under its weight. A mind that flinches at discomfort will sabotage abundance. Because wealth is pressure. It is responsibility wrapped in opportunity. It magnifies character flaws. It exposes laziness. It forces you to either mature or implode. That is why you cannot simply want millions. You must rewire yourself to be worthy of managing them. Not because wealth demands purity, but because it demands structure. A disordered man cannot command a structured reality. His results will always betray his internal chaos. This is not punishment. This is symmetry. The mind cannot attract what it cannot sustain. If your inner world is built on emotional shortcuts and intellectual escapism, your external world will collapse the moment momentum begins to build. You've been trained to chase revenue but ignore mental bandwidth, to scale income without scaling identity. But your mind is not a passenger, it is the pilot. And until you upgrade its operating system, every dollar you earn will carry the weight of instability. You must interrogate your patterns, every delay, every burnout, every self-inflicted toe. They are symptoms of thought loops that were never challenged. Loops you inherited from a culture built on limitation. You were taught to seek comfort, not clarity, to pursue ease, not endurance. And so the moment tension arrives, you freeze, the mind flattens, the mission dissolves. Because deep down, you have not yet made suffering sacred. $1,000,000 ideas are not rare. What's rare is the ability to hold an idea long enough to turn it into gravity. That requires patience. Patience is not passive. It is violent refusal to betray your trajectory. It is repetition with no dopamine. It is the discipline to not pivot every time feedback is delayed. The man who builds millions is not the man with the loudest brand. It is the one whose mind doesn't require applause to stay focused. He sees money not as a goal, but as a shadow of precision. When the structure of thought is aligned, income becomes inevitable. Not because the market is kind, but because the mind is immovable. Distractions are the modern form of mental decay. Not because they waste time, but because they fragment attention. And attention is the gateway drug to mastery. If you cannot hold your attention, you cannot build momentum. And if you cannot build momentum, you will never reach velocity. Every time you check your phone mid-task, you fracture the bridge between intention and execution. And wealth demands bridges. You must close the gap between thought and action, between discomfort and decision. That is how you become dangerous. Not by stacking hacks or copying strategies, but by owning the entire chain of thought from impulse to outcome without needing validation in between. People will tell you mindset is soft, that it's less important than capital connections or market timing. Those people will spend decades building things they secretly want to escape from. They will become rich and resentful because they never dealt with the ghosts. They never faced the identity that fueled their climb. And when they reach the summit, they realize the view is distorted. The millions don't silence the inner critic. They amplify it. That is why you must build wealth from clarity, from depth, from a mind that no longer negotiates with mediocrity. Otherwise, the money will be a mirror, one that shows you how empty the chase has made you. You have to kill your default settings, the voice that says take the easy win, the reflex that avoids risk, the instinct that overthinks instead of acting. These are not quirks, they are anchors. And every anchor delays the mind's evolution into power. If you want millions, you cannot merely want, you must install the capacity. And that installation process is ugly. It looks like losing friends, cutting out comfort, waking up with dread and doing it anyway. It is thankless, quiet, brutal. But that is the cost of coherence, and only a coherent mind can build coherent outcomes. The world doesn't pay you for effort. It pays you for perspective, for frameworks, for the ability to see the same data and extract sharper truth. That sharpness does not come from motivation. It comes from solitude, from hours of staring at the same problem until you see its spine. Most will never last that long. They will quit at boredom, at ambiguity, at the first sign of nonlinearity. But the builder stays. He understands that wealth is not about avoiding pain. It's about using it as leverage, as contrast, as proof that he's moved beyond needing comfort to create. A mind built for millions does not seek permission. It does not poll the crowd before acting. It moves first, corrects later. Not recklessly, but relentlessly. It trusts itself not because it is always right, but because it is always adaptable. And that adaptability is more valuable than accuracy, because the world changes fast, and those who need certainty before action die in limbo. You must learn to move with partial information and perfect conviction. That is what separates the thinker from the executor, the reader from the creator, the dreamer from the wealthy. Evolution does not care about your potential. It was not designed for greatness. It was designed for safety. It doesn't reward ambition. It rewards survival. And survival means one thing: conserve. Conserve energy, conserve movement, conserve mental effort. So the moment you try to build something grand, your nervous system flares like a silent alarm. It warns you. It makes you hesitate. It makes you save instead of spend. Not just money, but time, courage, imagination. You ration your energy like a man lost in the desert, and in doing so you remain poor. Not because you lack talent, but because you're still obeying biology that evolved for jungles and droughts, not digital leverage and exponential scale. Your body is still wired for the hunt. Your heartbeat spikes when you post something bold. Your gut clenches when you risk reputation. Your mind races with worst-case scenarios because it was built in an age where those scenarios meant death. But now, they just mean growth. And until you decouple your present reality from your ancient instincts, you will continue to shrink every time expansion calls your name. Wealth doesn't punish fear. It ignores it. It rewards momentum, and momentum demands energy, expended freely, relentlessly, without pausing every few steps to ask, is this safe? Because safety is no longer the goal. Sovereignty is. People think they're being careful, calculated, smart, but they are just addicted to conservation. They hoard calendars, hoard commitments, hoard bandwidth, because they think having time means having control. But time hoarded is time wasted. You cannot grow by saving your best hours for a future you're too afraid to chase. The great leap is not in knowing more. It is in spending energy on what feels too costly, not recklessly, but decisively. You must retrain your nervous system to stop mistaking intensity for danger. Intensity is the language of expansion, and expansion, by definition, feels unsafe to the part of you built to hide. The survival loop is elegant in its deception. It masks itself as rationality. It says wait for more signs, wait for more proof, wait until you're absolutely sure. But that waiting is a mirage. It never ends. Because the mind cannot simulate the unknown. It can only delay the inevitable. And the inevitable is this: you will have to move without full clarity. You will have to spend energy without guaranteed return. That is the price of evolution into higher consciousness. Not more safety, more exposure, more pressure, more stakes. That's what wealth really is. It's not accumulation. It's It's comfort in high-stakes environments. When you watch elite performers, you don't just see confidence. You see neurological calibration. Their system does not panic under volume. They don't conserve effort when the moment demands force. They engage fully. They spend with precision. And they recover fast. That is what separates them from the masses who hesitate. It's not that they don't feel fear. It's that their relationship to fear is different. They interpret adrenaline as a signal to move, not to freeze. And that reframe is biological, not intellectual. It comes from constant exposure to uncertainty until the body normalizes discomfort and no longer mistakes it for threat. Building wealth is the slow unwinding of a survival first nervous system. It is teaching the body that spending energy, not saving it, is now the metric of success. It is teaching the brain that investing time, not hoarding it, leads to fulfillment. This requires pain, repetition, frustration. It requires confronting every reflex that says, don't try too hard, don't aim too high, don't risk too much. Because those reflexes were inherited from ancestors who needed to hide to survive. But you weren't built to hide. You were built to extract meaning from chaos, to organize uncertainty into opportunity, to bleed for a vision that the cautious will never touch. You cannot talk your way into this. You have to feel it. You have to sit with the shaking, the shortness of breath, the internal resistance that screams conserve, conserve, conserve. And you have to override it, not with brute force, but with presence, with deep inner stillness that tells your body we're not in a jungle anymore. The predators are gone. The famine is gone. The war is psychological now. And the only way to win it is by expanding while your body still wants to shrink. That is the pivot point. That is the rewiring. Millions don't come to those who wait. They come to those who recondition, who turn risk into rhythm, who spend decisively, move consistently, and recover without spiraling, who reprogram the nervous system to see pressure not as a warning, but as proof that they are exactly where they should be. Most people collapse under pressure, not because they're flawed, but because they were never taught how to metabolize fear, how to convert it into focus, how to train their biology to match their ambition. They're trying to run $1,000,000 moves on prehistoric hardware. There is no shortcut. You will have to walk into the discomfort again and again until it stops dictating your decisions, until you no longer delay because of fatigue, until you no longer pause every time anxiety rises, until expansion becomes a default, not a debate. That is what evolution looks like in the modern age. No fur, no spears. Just men who've reprogrammed their threat detection systems to prioritize growth over survival. Men who understand that wealth does not arrive from conservation. It arrives when you calm the body's panic and act anyway. Evolution taught you to conserve energy, but wealth begins the moment you stop obeying that lesson. When you stop flinching, stop over-saving your potential. When you realize that the safest place to be is inside momentum, not outside of effort. The mind paths to millions are paved by those who rewrote their survival code and dared to act like expansion is the new baseline. Every empire begins with where a man chooses to look. Attention is not casual, it is causal. Every dollar earned begins as a second spent with precision. and every empire lost begins with scattered focus. Most men hemorrhage wealth long before they even earn it. They leak attention into meaningless scrolls, thoughtless conversations, and reactive impulses. They confuse stimulation for productivity and wonder why results never compound. But focus is not optional in the architecture of abundance. It is the currency that buys momentum. And momentum, once purchased, returns interest in clarity, consistency, and ultimately capital. If your attention leaks, your outcomes never coagulate. They spread thin, they decay. The modern world is engineered to fracture your gaze. Algorithms feed you novelty like a drug dealer feeds a fiend. Every ping, notification, and scroll is a tiny tax on your future bandwidth. You don't pay with money. You pay with trajectory. And once you dilute your attention enough times, your nervous system forgets how to sit with depth. You can no longer hold a problem long enough to solve it. You flinch. You refresh. You escape. And that escape costs you. Because building wealth is not about action bursts. It is about focused repetition over unsexy timelines. That focus must be earned, protected, weaponized. The myth is that the rich are more talented, that they're smarter or more fortunate. But often, they are simply less distracted. They have trained their mind to defend its bandwidth like territory. They don't open tabs casually. They don't allow reactive loops. They eliminate access to their attention the way a sovereign closes borders, because they understand this law: where attention flows, energy follows, and results accumulate. If your attention is scattered, your life will be too. The correlation is brutal, but it is true. You are not in control of your future until you are in control of what you focus on in the present. Most people waste time like it's air, as if there's more coming, as if their nervous system can take unlimited hits from distraction and still deliver genius. But attention is finite. Every moment you spend reacting, scrolling, overthinking, doom, planning, is not just lost. It calcifies a neural pathway that will betray you later. It creates a baseline, one where shallow thinking becomes default, where interruptions feel normal, where slowness feels unbearable. And in that state, building anything meaningful becomes painful. Focus is the only state where deep solutions emerge. Without it, you build on sand. The lie is that multitasking is efficient, that you can juggle tabs, texts, and timelines without consequence. But every switch taxes the brain. Every flicker between contexts resets the rhythm of cognition. You think you're managing time, but you're mortgaging bandwidth. The bill always comes later, in the form of fatigue, in the form of burnout, in the form of missed insight because your depth was diluted. The most dangerous men are not those who move fast. They are those who move slow with violent clarity, because clarity pierces. Clarity builds leverage, and leverage builds abundance. The reason you admire those who seem to produce endlessly is because they have reclaimed their attention from the marketplace. They don't feed the machine. They build from signal, not noise. They treat each hour like a vault, each task like a contract, each thought like an investment. And over time, that discipline compounds into momentum that cannot be faked. You cannot outsource depth. You cannot buy back bandwidth. You earn it through decisions no one sees, through refusals no one celebrates, through silence that would terrify the average man. Focus hurts at first, because your nervous system is addicted to novelty. You will crave the ping, the scroll, the distraction. It will feel like starvation. But if you hold the line, something strange happens. The brain stops twitching. It starts settling. It starts pointing inward instead of outward. And in that inner terrain, genius wakes up. It was never gone. It was drowned. And the moment you stop feeding the noise, the signal returns. That is the beginning of sovereignty. Not over the world, but over your mind. Abundance does not belong to the scattered. It belongs to the obsessed. To those who can hold a vision without diluting it with 1,000 competing inputs. To those who understand that every minute of fractured focus is a minute subtracted from their future power. If you want to build something that scales, you must first build a mind that can hold intensity, that can stare at the same target for months without blinking. That is the rarest discipline, and that is why most drift, because staring feels like pain when you're used to blinking. Every result you want already exists in the timeline of your potential. The question is whether you have the bandwidth to walk that timeline without stepping off, whether you can say no to distraction not just once, but 1,000 times in private when no one is watching, whether you can close the tab, mute the noise, and sit with the resistance long enough to extract something real. The war is not out there. It is in your relationship to your own gaze. Who owns it? Who benefits from it? And whether you will take it back before it's sold off piece by piece. A poor mind sees time as a straight road, one action, one direction. It moves like a mule, step by step, tethered to cause and effect as if the universe were a predictable machine. It plans in days, thinks in hours, measures worth in minutes. This kind of mind can only work harder, never smarter, never exponentially. Every effort is isolated, contained, and soon exhausted. This is why the poor stay busy and never build, because their energy has no echo. Their actions die the moment they're done. Their time produces no offspring. A wealth mind sees time as a lattice, a woven structure where one decision influences 10 unseen outcomes. It does not move linearly. It moves recursively. It revisits, adapts, and compounds. When it acts in layers. It builds mechanisms, not just moments. It installs loops that feed themselves long after the hand is removed. Every movement is designed to echo, to resonate, to multiply. This is not magic. It is architecture. And architecture demands higher-order thinking. While the average man performs, the wealthy thinker deploys. He writes code that runs while he sleeps. He plants seeds that sprout in silence. He detaches effort from immediacy. The illusion is that both men worked, but only one built a machine. The other just sweated. Linear effort punishes scale. If your system cannot outlive your energy, you've built a cage, not a ladder. Most minds treat life like a to-do list, but a wealth mind thinks in flywheels, systems that gain momentum with use, thoughts that spark sub-thoughts, content that births opportunity, offers that automate outcomes. Every action placed into the world is not a closing act. It's a node in a larger pattern, a signal that magnetizes future events. That's why they seem to be in multiple places at once, because they designed it that way. This thinking cannot be faked. You cannot pretend to be non-linear with a mind still addicted to instant confirmation. It takes reprogramming. You must break the habit of chasing completion and begin chasing replication. Ask not what you can finish, but what you can deploy. What repeats? What lives without maintenance? What expands without babysitting? The wealth mind doesn't grind, it engineers, and every output is designed to feed the next, asynchronously, indefinitely, quietly. That is why it looks like magic, but it's not. It's recursion wearing silence. The hardest part is killing the addiction to closure, the dopamine of ticking boxes, the illusion of progress through sheer motion. Linear minds crave finish lines. Wealth minds crave feedback loops. They don't ask what's next. They ask what repeats. They don't build steps. They build spirals. They think in cause and consequence nested inside each other. They take an hour of effort and install it into a machine that works for months. Not because they're more talented, but because they understand structure.